Episode 382 of A to the Show. I'm on with Rania Hoteit. Rania Hoteit is a multi-award winning serial entrepreneur, global impact leader, author, executive advisor, public speaker, with recognitions from the White House, United Nations, UK Parliament, and many more accolades. Thank you so much, Rania, for coming on our podcast. Really appreciate your time here. How's your day going so far?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. My day is going great, and I'm really excited to be speaking with you guys. And I'm hoping we're going to have an exciting and thrilling conversation where everybody will learn something new, and it will be inspiring for everyone, I hope.
All right, pretty much let's jump right into it, right? You've gotten pretty far in your life. Did you always know that you'd be where you are right now? Or did it just happen that you became the person you were? Yeah. Do you always have this vision, or was it a day-by-day thing for you?
That's a great question, because it's one of the hardest ones to answer, especially when your career path and your life evolves in very unpredictable ways sometimes, even if you have a plan, right? But for me personally, I came from very humble beginnings. At the age of 18, I migrated to the United States alone. I only had $1,000 in my pocket. I had no set plan, no clear vision of the future, and absolutely no idea how I was going to survive and continue my education. I'm originally from Lebanon, so I came from Lebanon all the way to Detroit. That was my first destination coming into the United States before I actually moved to California and started my businesses there. But if you were to ask me this particular question when I was boarding the plane back then at the age of 18, with so much uncertainty and so much anxiety and fear around what's going to happen to me when I get to a new place and not really know how I'm going to handle myself and what's going to happen, I would have probably answered by saying no. I wouldn't have known where I'm going to be later. But I guess since I was a child, I always had a very strong initiative. I had self-direction. I had a sense of my own identity and my potential. And I always had my own philosophies and perspectives about life. So I knew I had big dreams. I had big ambitions. And most importantly, I always knew that I can reach what I set my mind to and achieve what I work hard for. And it's this willpower and drive that got me where I am today and will keep propelling me forward. And I don't know where I will be in 10 years from now, so don't ask me that. I do have plans, but I will, we'll see how things evolve and how growth happens as well. So
it's like you have like plans and you have a drive to get those plans done, but of course, we all know that the world is so random and things can randomly happen and challenges you never saw just coming your way. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
What are some challenges that you faced and gone through?
There was many challenges and struggles that I personally had to face at different phases of my life, from navigating through a difficult upbringing. I grew up during the civil war in Lebanon, for example. So that was a very particular experience that I went through as a child growing up during wartime, to becoming a self-starter in a new country and carving an unconventional career path. I didn't go to school to be a doctor or to be a lawyer, or it was an unconventional career path for me because it evolved a lot throughout the years. Being an entrepreneur is particularly a different task that requires tremendous faith and determination and grit. So in the beginnings of my journey as an entrepreneur, I had no guidance. I had no financial support. I had no mentors. And overall, as a student who was starting a business as well while going to school full-time, and having none of that support system, the circumstances overall were far from ideal to take any kind of risks. I was working multiple jobs while attending college full-time, as I mentioned, and I had to invest a tremendous effort to obtain the business knowledge on my own because, as I said as well, I didn't have any mentors. Beyond that baseline of not having a support system and guidance, I had to break through so many barriers due to being an immigrant, due to the fact that I'm also a female and a young entrepreneur. So I was being stereotyped, my competencies were being judged, I was facing discrimination and blatant sexism, and I really faced so much opposition from haters and people who just want to sabotage your success just because. So there was
Right.
many difficult experiences along the way. But there's always a way to overcome struggles. You have to have the right mindset, and not just the right mindset, but to have a fighting spirit, like where you have the willpower to
Grit.
overcome. Exactly.
Mhm.
How were you able to acquire this business knowledge with all of this adversity you had in front of you? If you can give us some insight.
And mainly, honestly, I was looking at startup entrepreneurs, what they were doing, how they were going about things. I was reading so much content. I was learning from business books. I would just put my hands on any kind of content that would give me some head start on what to do, what I need to learn in terms of setting up a business. What are the legal types of information that I need to acquire in order to set up a structure and a business that I can start to run? What I need to do in terms of handling things like HR and hiring people and intellectual property issues. And so it's really just putting your hands on the knowledge and researching. And the knowledge is there. It's just a matter of you having the curiosity and having the
Mhm.
drive. And again, the willpower is I want to know. So I'm going to go and seek out that knowledge because the knowledge is there. The experiences are there. There are so many successful people out in the world who've been there and done that. And you can learn from other people, and you can learn from textbooks, and you can learn from lectures. So it's really, again, a matter of you putting in the time and effort to seek out the knowledge that can help you grow on your path and achieve what you want to achieve, especially when it comes to business knowledge. In school, we don't get taught anything about business. You grow up, and I'm sure you can relate to this experience as well. You go all the way through high school, and up until then, you really don't have any knowledge about finances, about
Mhm.
taxes, about entrepreneurship, about leadership, about financial independence. You have no idea about any of those concepts. And you are barely struggling to decide what you want to go to school for and what kind of degree you want to get. I don't think we are well equipped in terms of the education we have now in order to thrive and maneuver in the most efficient ways possible in this new economy. So again, I encourage everyone to just seek out the knowledge. Even if you're going to traditional school and you're getting the education you are aiming to receive, you have to also be able to seek out any other knowledge that you're not necessarily receiving throughout your traditional educational path.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
I want to point out, since we're talking about the education system, since you're an entrepreneur, do you actually believe the education system provides the proper tools or proper skill set to become an entrepreneur? Like, because for me, the way I perceive it, it's the education system is terrible at creating entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are mainly self-made. The education system basically provides you the knowledge and skill set to be an employee.
Specialized.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've been through that as well. I mean, I was a bit luckier in terms of the schools I went to had a little bit more of an understanding of entrepreneurship in a way. There was some business classes in college, but not everyone was going to, because the majority of the ideology is that you need to get your degree, have a great portfolio as a designer, an architect, an engineer, and just get out there and get a good job at a notable or a well-known corporation, and you made it in life. So most students' aim was to really just get that job at that company that they dream of working for. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the education for people who have more of an entrepreneurial streak is definitely lacking in the majority of schools. Even if you go to business school, it doesn't make you an entrepreneur. You can acquire the business knowledge. And that's why when you look at the majority of successful entrepreneurs, very few of them actually came from a business background, from an educational standpoint. They didn't necessarily have MBAs or go to business school.
Right,
They
that's
were
right.
actually people, there were people that have ideas, and
Right.
they're able to get the business skills through experience and expertise, and through getting other people that have the formal business knowledge to execute on business strategies. But you don't have to have a business degree in order to be successful in business. You need to have the entrepreneurial spirit, you need to have the ambition, you need to have the curiosity to learn, and you need to have really great ideas that you can actually build valuable businesses with and grow with as well. But education is definitely lacking on that front. And at least up until now, you still have to seek out the knowledge in terms of the passions that you have outside of the traditional curriculums that most schools offer.
Yeah, that's very well put, and definitely like having drive and having curiosity are something that makes us, uniquely human, right? And I want to pivot a little bit to talk about AI, since that's part of your expertise. Your company's initiatives have really helped create social change, and I'm curious what you think the role of AI could be in human rights and strengthening human rights.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm excited to talk about it because people do not really put the two together. They don't put AI with humans in any way, let alone with human rights. And I'm going to speak particularly from my work in the production and the supply chain manufacturing world. There are major human rights violations in the global production pipeline that are driven by capitalist greed, lack of innovation on the technical front, and workers pay for that because they have to work more, getting paid less, and then you have the capitalists trying to exploit workers in order to maximize their benefits. And I'm just going to give some statistics here because not many people understand how big of an issue that is when it comes to workers' rights. Based on data from the United Nations and the International Labor Organization, there is an estimate of 40 million plus people that are in modern slavery. They are exploited both by the private sector and by state authorities. There are 29 million women and girls who are being disproportionately affected out of those 40 million. So the majority that are affected by exploitation are women and girls. There's also about 25 million people that are in forced labor, such as domestic work, agriculture, construction, manufacturing, and mining. There are 16 million people who are in forced sexual exploitation, and 1 of 4 victims are children. So worldwide, when we just look at child labor, there is about 218 million children between the age of 5 and 17 that are in employment instead of being in schools, and out of which there are about 52 million that are in child labor. Almost half of them are children that are working in extremely dangerous, hazardous work environments, being exposed to toxic fumes, to chemicals, to materials that can cause irreversible damage on their respiratory, reproductive, and neurological systems. That's what the world of work looks like for the people out there. When it comes to bringing in technology and how that can actually help to change the working conditions, and I'm so grateful we've had the privilege to be able to go into this field and help so many people when it comes to reducing exploitation of labor and bringing more equity in the workplace through technology. But when it comes to automation, the way automation can impact the reduction of global exploitation, it happens in 3 major ways. First of all, it can save lives by removing workers from conditions that threaten their health and safety. Number 2, it can eliminate the incentive for companies to exploit low-wage workers in local production. And lastly, it could help to increase wages and create more jobs. And not only more jobs, but safer and better work environments. So those are really the major things that I personally see, and we've seen it through practice, through the work that we do on the ground with the companies that we work with and the organizations that we partner up with. As the entire production cycle becomes efficient due to implementation of AI and robotics and other exponential technologies, there will be higher levels of productivity that lead to lower prices on products, increased demand, and help companies generate more profits without having to lower the wages of workers and exploit children and women in order to make the profit. And also another thing, when you're really increasing production through implementing automation technologies and AI, you're also creating more jobs because now the company is making more money. They theoretically can pay workers better salaries. They can provide safer and healthier work conditions. And that also gives the opportunity for them to invest in the education and training of workers as they adapt to automation and shift into new jobs that focus more on innovation and new operations. This is really the reality of how the technology works that many people are not fully aware of, and that makes them so scared and unable to understand how implementing these technologies can have a huge positive impact.
Okay, so based on that point about creating more jobs, is this true also for less developed countries, or is this mainly for developed countries, since most of the exploitation occurs by foreign private companies? Then they exploit the labor force of like a less developed country. If these corporations start using AI, but maybe they do it in the countries where they're located in, this would provide obviously more jobs there, but okay, it would remove the terrible workspace for the people who are in the less developed countries, but will it also provide them jobs? Or
Yeah, it does, because it really applies to all. And like you mentioned, most of the exploitation happens in local production, meaning that companies come in to places where they think they could save on labor and they could save on cost, and they set up their manufacturing plants. And then they start to export to other places, but they're reducing their cost mainly by exploiting workers, which is the craziest thing ever. But really, wherever you are, if the goal of the company by exploiting workers is to reduce costs and maximize profit, when the processes of production get automated, no matter where you are, the companies can save money, they can experience growth without having to compromise the human dignity and sacrificing millions of people's health and safety. This is just how it works. Of course, the wages will still differ between country to country, but at least the exploitation will not be there. Being exposed to danger and to highly toxic environments will be eliminated or reduced. The age of the workers will be more monitored. How the work environment is set up will also be more monitored and will be more legal and set up in respect to human rights. So again, the impact is absolutely positive wherever you are. It doesn't matter. But since companies mainly go to other markets to set up production shops and manufacturing plants, the main reason is to really minimize the cost and maximize the profit. And they go about it normally by exploiting workers, because they do deploy very old school and traditional ways of production as well.
No one wants to be exploited, and I always think that, especially kids, if you have a whole generation of kids that are not being exploited anymore, they can get their education and then, help their countries grow and be developed. I think in our internet society where we can all see each other, we can all compare to each other, and I think this technology can help even the playing field a little bit, right? So because no one has to do these jobs where they're being exploited, now they can start thinking of ways to become their own entrepreneurs, or to be more creative, or do jobs that aren't as automatic and more manual, but more creative and human. So
absolutely. Especially that when you implement these technologies, you're really giving people the power back to think, rather than being labor machines that are being used just for their physical capacity, like any machine. That's why we bring the machine. We bring the machine to give the human their humanity back. That's my philosophy. That's my take on this. We don't create the machine in order to take humanity away from humans. We bring it in so we can give them humanity back, so they could think, they could enjoy themselves. They could be less robotic and less used and abused as labor workers, and more respected for their capacity to think and to innovate and to participate in a working environment where they are more valued for their intellectual capacities.
That sounds good to me. Yeah, that sounds great to me.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, since we're mentioning humanity, this might be a bit off what we're currently saying. Have you, I don't know if you've heard about how Saudi Arabia gave citizenship to an AI? Maybe it was a few years back or something like that. What's your opinion on maybe AI rights in the future?
Well, I'm going to say one thing, because with the Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of sensitivity around the culture of Saudi Arabia, right? So I don't want to go off in tangents about that, but it's just ironic for a country that has so many resources to be given citizenship to an AI, but also exploiting so many workers and treating foreign workers like crap. That's all what I'm going to say about that. Okay. I think if you are that advanced in your thinking and in your ideology as an economic power, then if you're capable of embracing AI and humanizing AI by giving a citizenship, then you might want to revise your policies and your behaviors and actions in terms of how you actually treat humans that come into the country to work, and they end up being treated much less than a human and being, exploited in many different ways. So I hope that they could level the field in terms of how they are a huge economic power. They have so much capacity. They could lead the way in terms of setting the example when it comes to embracing technologies. I also would love to see them bridging the gap there and showing up in the same way when it comes to human rights.
I agree.
Yeah, definitely. They're hypocrites in this perspective.
And I hope I don't want to offend
Yes,
anyone
no offending
about that.
No. It's
Yes.
I speak about this in every place. I mean, we have so many initiatives when it comes to exploitation in different places. So, it's just one of the places that do suffer from that as well. That's why I brought it up.
obviously we still struggle to properly apply human rights around the world. AI is growing so rapidly, and maybe one day they might develop conscience. They might become sentient. I don't know. Like, I'm just like going a bit wild with it. It's a bit too futuristic, I know. But is it possible? And is it something that we might see, like AI and humans on the same level, consciously speaking?
It is possible, but as long as we are the ones that are developing the technology, the most we can do and reach is make it as intelligent as we are. It's very hard to make something that's more intelligent than you. It's just not logical. It's not possible. It really depends on how these developments go, but I personally see that the technology is developing in a way where there's so much effort is being put into really making AI much more smarter and much more conscious and much more capable of making decisions and operating like we operate as humans when it comes to consciousness. These developments are still in the works, but at the end of the day, the smartest AI will only be as smart as the smartest human who created it. That's still a range that we don't know how far we're going to go because we have so many brilliant people working on these developments. So again, it really depends on how far we go, and it will be dependent as well on how smart and how intelligent the people are who are working on it. But there's no machine that can be much smarter than we are, because at the end of the day, we're creating it. It might not be as smart as all of us, but it will be as smart as the person who created it, at least.
I feel like we're gonna pull this podcast up in like 10 years in the future and see how the predictions really align.
Maybe an AI would pull up this podcast and be like, see, you were wrong. It's like, we're smarter than all of you now.
I wanted, on the point of AI, I want to know about how is the role of human work going to change, right? We already have, I saw a few weeks ago, there was like this robot AI nurse, pretty much. That's a nurse, but AI. And there are many AIs that are doing all these different jobs and roles. So what's left for us humans? How do you think, we're just predicting, you understand this, so what do you think the roles of humans and the new jobs that are going to come out of this?
To be very accurate about automation, because there's so many statistics out there about automation taking away jobs and all that. In reality, to be more accurate, automation has already started to create new roles and new jobs. There are at least 10 future jobs already in the market right here, right now. And some of these jobs, are not very common to most people because they are emergent, and not a lot of people are aware that they do have so much potential to ride the wave and really thrive in the new economy and look at new jobs, because everybody's still looking at the jobs that they are familiar with, but they're not looking at the new roles that are emerging due to the fast growing technologies and innovation when it comes to automation and AI. Like I mentioned, there are 10 future jobs right here, right now, that not everybody's going to school to study or are aware that they exist. Some of these jobs are automation economists, AI trainer, business process automation programmer, chatbot copywriter, machine learning engineer, chief listening officer, that people don't know what that is.
Right.
There's a robot technician, there are tech ethicists, and many others that are still emerging. So that said, there are many opportunities for employment in the new economy. And if we look at the data, new data reveals that there are 96 jobs across 7 professional clusters that are fast emerging in tandem, reflecting digital and human factors that are driving growth in the future of work. And all of these reflect the adoption of new technologies, like increasing demand for new green economy jobs, roles at the forefront of data and AI economy, as well as new roles in engineering, cloud computing, product development. So the problem is people with low educational attainment are going to be the most at risk. Yep. Due to automation and the rise of robotics in the workplace. So education and training are critical problems to be solved to close the skill gap by developing the professional competences that are needed to fulfill these new roles. The growth and the absolute scale of these opportunities will really be determined by the choices and the investments that are made by companies, by educational institutions, and by governments as well. So the potential is there. The new roles are there. We just need to really get people more educated and more trained for these specific jobs and let them understand more what's happening in the economy. A lot of people are in the dark about what's really going on. If you're not specialized in a certain area, you don't even hear about these jobs. You don't understand that those things exist, let alone you knowing that you have an opportunity to go get a training and get an incredible job that's not what the traditional educational system is necessarily providing you. So you don't need to go get a degree, but you can maybe go get a specialized certification to be able to get one of these jobs, because now you're going to have much higher a chance to fulfill this role because you have the exact skills that it takes to fulfill that role and to perform at your best.
Wow. Yeah, I will say I never thought of it that way. That you're right about the issue that people who might be impacted are people who do not have high education attainment. You said it. That creates new roles for us to teach new people, and education is going to be even more important and going to have an even bigger role. And maybe that might be where people can get jobs in the future too. And
I think that role falls upon the government in some way, because if they are going to start implementing in their economy like automation and AI, they're obviously going to benefit from that because the economy is going to grow. In that sense, if they want to increase the participation of the people, they're going to have to educate them and provide the opportunities of education to the local populace.
Yeah. 100%. It's really the different sectors. You have the private sector that's also responsible because you have companies that are evolving and how they operate by implementing technologies. So they have a big responsibility when it comes to upskilling and training their workers to be able to fulfill these new roles. That's actually one of the core initiatives that we do when we're working with companies and implementing technologies with them, is to make sure that there's a whole training program that's set up to elevate the quality and educational level and really bring people up to date with the skills in order to stay. So they don't have to do these major layoffs if they actually start to invest in the upskilling and training of their workers. And then you have the government, of course, that needs to be investing in their own workers and also facilitating the job for companies and for educational institutions to set up these kind of curriculums to help upskill and train and give the right education for people. So it has to be a collaborative effort between the different sectors, especially with COVID-19. I want to mention that with COVID-19 specifically, the way companies and industries conduct their businesses around the world have permanently changed. And one of the biggest impacts is related to automation, since businesses had to adapt to the sudden changes in the market. And without automation, to be honest, I mean, if we really want to be very realistic, it's highly unlikely that the changes and adapting to the change is highly unlikely to happen efficiently and profitably without automation. So all that said, it means that these roles that are emerging now are not going to be optional anymore. They are going to be critical. So we just need to really get people to understand what's happening in the market a little bit more, besides just freaking them out about COVID-19 and other things. They need to really know how they could function in the new economy with all the changes that are going on. And I think there's a lot of effort that needs to happen there in terms of bringing awareness and giving hope to people rather than keep spreading these dystopic messages about the world.
Literally. I mean, you're blowing my mind right now, Rania. Honestly, like all this information you're saying, I wish that was on the news, and I wish, I had this information to tell my little cousin what kind of job he should get. So literally, I'm going to send this podcast to him so he can really know like what to do, because like what you're saying is so real and it's so true, but it's also, I've never heard it. This is the first time I'm hearing all this. So I'm curious, what do you think? So it's happening pretty fast, as you said, with COVID's expediting it too. What are the roadblocks right now in AI and automation? I mean, you said there are like millions of people that are being exploited due to the work market, and we would like them not to be exploited as soon as possible, right? So what is the barrier right now for AI?
I think the main challenges right now is specifically in robotics. In the robotics area, there are many challenges, especially that's what's been really needed to expedite operations. During the last 5 years, robots have become an indispensable tool for many companies, particularly over the last 2 years, like I mentioned, with the challenges such as supply chain disruptions. We have labor shortages, as we just talked about, the lack of education and training. So there is labor shortages, not only because of the disruptions that are happening in the supply chain, but also because there are skill gaps. Also, you have the pandemic fears. All of that has contributed to an increased demand for manufacturing robots. And with that comes also the advancements in AI. Robotics is still one of the most advanced fields in technology today. And that's something people are also not aware of. But that really also the fact that it incorporates a spectrum of other technologies, like artificial intelligence, like automation, like the Internet of Things. All of these technologies have really contributed to bringing robotics advancements to the forefront. Despite these advances, however, the sector still has a long way to go. And some of the biggest challenges that we are seeing in robotics right now are primarily for developers and for manufacturers. The focus now needs to be on increasing the multifunctionality of robots, the navigation and mapping skills, how to expand valid artificial intelligence, the sustainability and energy efficiency issues that we still struggle with, social relationships and overall ethics, like Saeed mentioned that earlier, and he was trying to talk about that as well. So all these issues, in addition to privacy issues. So once we really start to work on increasing the efficiency and the multifunctionality of these different areas, I think robots can start to advance and do more meaningful work, and people will start to feel much less threatened by the presence of robots and the implementation of artificial intelligence and other types of technologies as well.
Yeah, I think the main thing that drives people to be against AI is the fear of the unknown. They don't know what AI is, what it can do. The main picture that is portrayed to them is the things they see on TV or in movies, like Terminator and stuff like that. I mean, exactly. There are also so many myths. Exactly. But for me, when I was doing my research on AI, one of the things that popped out for me is the possibility of having a universal basic income. I don't know if that is something that's plausible. So if you could maybe give us some insight on that, I would like to hear your opinion on it.
Well, it's a very controversial topic, obviously, when it comes to that. I don't want to get into the politics of it all so much, but what I would say is that everybody deserves to have at least a minimum wage that can help you to survive, right? The problem now is that we have people that are struggling so much and they can barely pay the bills and they can barely keep up, but they're working so much. So it just doesn't make sense how much they're working compared to how much money they're making and how much they're struggling. And a big part of that, I personally believe, is really the nature of work. It's just the nature of things we do. A lot of the things we do are very slow because a lot of it is very labor intensive, and labor work is slow work. So you end up doing so much more and getting paid so much less, just again, because you are being used up like a machine rather than using your intellectual capacities, where with those capacities you could exponentially grow and you could exponentially move. And that's why you have people that are thriving, working much less but making a lot more. And then you have people that are working so much more and making so much less. I think at the end of the day, it's really about changing the nature of work itself and what people need to focus on in terms of the type of work that they do in order to maximize the value of their time. Because right now, nobody wants to be working 10 hours a day, making less than $9 an hour or $10 an hour. And in some countries, people are making less than $1 an hour or some less than $1 a day. It's absolutely insane if you really look at the global economy and how the wages are distributed. I just think that technology can really give everyone a way to start becoming more efficient in terms of how they do work, but also it gives you new avenues in terms of entrepreneurship and business and bringing new ideas to the world and just existing in a different way than we've been conditioned to exist for so long. That's just, my take on that.
Yeah, I'm hopeful on it. That's a great take, honestly, very insightful.
I'd love for us to talk about the myth, honestly, because I feel like people really need to hear.
I think we're leaving it for the best for last, maybe. Yeah.
Tell us about the myth. What are the myths?
Oh, you want to talk about it now? Okay.
Yeah, let's go for it.
I was excited when you mentioned myth because it's one of those critical things when it comes to actually educating the public, right? You have to debunk myth in order to bridge that educational gap and really bring the knowledge forward so people can understand what's real and what's not. Automation in general is really prevalent across industries. Yet, what we're seeing is not every business is ready to implement it due to hesitations, due to doubts that are grounded in Yeah, it's new. But the hesitations and the doubts and the fears are really grounded in absolutely nothing but common myth, by hearsays, by misunderstandings, by incorrect assumptions about automation. So the first one I want to talk about is people think that automation is too expensive, especially for small businesses. To be clear, automation is costly, but the return on investment from implementing it exceeds the initial investment for any type of business. On one hand, you're automating redundant tasks. That increases your productivity and it saves money because now you are really getting multiple benefits for the cost of one. So that's one. Number two, on the other hand, automation saves time so employees can focus on innovation. Like I mentioned earlier, you give people their humanity back by removing them from roles where they have to operate like machines. When it comes to the second portion of that myth, automation is not reserved for big companies that have only large budgets. That's absolutely a lie. In reality, small businesses, what they tend to do is they tend to really waste so much money on run-of-the-mill types of expenses every day. And for that same cost, they could pay for a whole month of a subscription to an automation software that can help them to grow in the long term. And there are so many studies by McKinsey and other research companies about the implementation of automation technologies for businesses that really show companies that implement automation are at least 6 times more likely to experience revenue growth of 15% or more versus companies that have. That's a huge difference. And in other cases, in our cases, for example, working in the industrial sector, the solutions that we've been able to create have been saving customers $50 to $60 million on average over a 3-year run, while increasing their return on investment by a minimum of 249%, while they're achieving very high efficiencies of 45% reduction in energy and consumption and up to 62% in cost savings. So in addition to the decrease of harmful emissions and overall positive impact on providing a safer, healthier work environments for workers. So that's myth number one. The second myth that people shy away from automation or they're scared to implement it is they think that automation is tough or it's difficult. I personally think that companies that think automation is tough definitely have not visualized it from a business standpoint. Many people think that automation is a rule-based decision to automate business functions and that these will work in a standard, simple workflows and it will eventually get so complex with scale, so they avoid it altogether. So they fear having to fix and debug issues, as well as fearing that they will have to break the standard workflow. Again, such fear is absolutely ungrounded because there are many open source software. There are proprietary options in the market that you can easily integrate with any system to keep the workflow intact, regardless of your company's underlying computing environment and technologies. We talked earlier about upskilling people. If you are hiring the right people, skilled people, and you have the proper planning, security measures, technology guidelines, automation could absolutely prevent the rushes to fix any issues. So yes, automation can be tough when one doesn't have a clear picture of which business objective they have to achieve. The third one, that automation can't help if you have complex infrastructure. That's another illogical myth, that automation is only useful for simple tasks and it can't help businesses with complex infrastructures and workflows. Yes, it's true that automation cannot particularly handle unique or infrequent and unpredictable workflows that require human analyses or expert decision making, but it could be a perfect fit into any complex infrastructure, and it could even help to break complex workflows down into a more simplified and repetitive tasks that can eventually increase the efficiency and the productivity, and it will also reduce the workload that your team is training under. Back to what we again said earlier, once you start to implement these things, you reduce the labor work and the workload on your team and on the people and give them the chance to do other things where they could use their brains and their creativity. The fourth myth that I want to talk about, which is important to make a distinction, people think that automation and artificial intelligence are the same. Although the terms are used interchangeably, they are entirely different concepts. Automation is designed to complete repetitive tasks at high speed and efficiency through taking inputs and performing logical operations. Very straightforward. Typically, when a process reaches maturity, companies start to automate the process to reduce any efficiencies and workloads. For example, if you have an organization, you start to automate the hiring process, and that's how you reduce HR's workload, for example. AI, on the other hand, is an advanced technology. And that's what I was saying earlier when you asked about the AI and how far we're going to go. AI is an advanced technology that can predict, it can perform high-end functions, it can help to make decisions that involve activities that dissect and analyze massive data. So this is a lot of brain power when we're talking about how AI works. Here you have the output and the input are trained and they're tested to precisely detect a prediction pattern. For example, when you use your phone for autocorrection, this is AI at work right there, right?
Yeah.
So that said, process automation is not artificial intelligence. Automation is not intelligent. It doesn't use machine learning. It cannot make decisions. It cannot come up with solutions or draw conclusions for you. However, and that's how we work in industry, when you combine automation with artificial intelligence, this is when you can transform your business operations for good. Do we have time if I want to go over one more myth that I think is really important, which is about automation that will make most jobs redundant and it will take all jobs. This wouldn't be really much of an automation myth list if we didn't include this one, which is the biggest fear, that robots will replace humans and automation will take all the jobs. That's why I think we really need to talk about it. Such fear is not new. It's been around for hundreds of years. It has emerged with every wave of mechanization and technological advancement throughout history. However, such predictions, they never manifested in reality, and technology never led to mass unemployment. So I really want people to just stop being so scared about that. Automation can replace most repetitive tasks. Yes, it doesn't mean that businesses will get rid of employees or that people will be jobless, simply because humans will always be required to keep technologies updated and to handle more complex tasks that require creativity, that require reasoning, that require innovation. And I mentioned about the 96 different types of jobs that are emerging out there. So we just need to educate more people on that. Also, the latest studies from the World Economic Forum, they project that a third of all jobs will be at risk in the next decade due to automation. And it projects at the same time that there's an upside of 133 million new jobs and the creation of 58 million more jobs that will be available for people. Those are more jobs than what the displacement is going to happen.
Right.
So it's true that automation will take some jobs, but it will also create many more roles and employment opportunities in the new economy that didn't exist before. And without a doubt, it already has started doing so, like I mentioned earlier. So I just wanted to put this out there because I think people are so scared and they really need to know more about that.
Right. Pretty much we're having a little bit of an energy crisis in the whole world right now. And
specifically our home country.
Specifically our home country, Lebanon, our beautiful Lebanon, has no energy right now. And I'm curious to think what your thoughts are on like potential solutions, right? Because you need energy to power all this AI and automation or whatever. So what do you think some solutions could be?
Since we're speaking to a global audience that doesn't necessarily know about all the details related to Lebanon's economy or political climate, the energy crisis has been ongoing for decades. So to put things in perspective for our listeners outside of Lebanon, today the country is facing one of the world's worst financial crises since the 1850s. Since 2019, there has been a dramatic devaluation of the Lebanese currency. There's a soaring inflation. And as a result, right now, we have about 82% of the total Lebanese population of 4 million people that are living in poverty. And out of that 82%, there are 34% that are living already in extreme poverty based on the latest UN reports. Meanwhile, the fuel prices have risen more than 10 times. Following the progressive lifting of fuel subsidies that happened last year without any alternative support for vulnerable people. Now you need to fill your car. It's worth the minimum unchanged monthly wage to fill up a car tank. That's how ridiculous the prices of fuel are. The prices diesel used for heating has also spiked. More people are in dire need of energy sources to run heaters and private generators that supplement the government's poor electricity coverage. To make it even more realistic, that as we speak right now, there are around 250,000 homes that don't have access to state electricity. Regular power cuts are lasting about 22 to 24 hours a day in some areas. Not to forget that we have the Syrian refugee crisis. We have the catastrophic Beirut ports explosion that left thousands of families exposed due to the severe damages to their homes, and not having necessarily the finances or the proper heating appliances to live through the cold winter season that we've been going through recently. Even if we look at before the economic crash, the country's energy grid was in terrible shape. You have years of corruption and mismanagement. The electricity sector is on the brink of total collapse. I say all this because the problem is so complex, and it needs a more multi-dimensional problem-solving approach. And undoubtedly, the most pragmatic solution for Lebanon is to transition to renewable energy. Lebanon has more than 300 sunny days per year, which makes it a great fit to generate solar power. There is also potential for wind and hydroelectricity, and experts already know that, but unfortunately there is no support from the government. So, to be more realistic, people will say this is too much. Yes, to be realistic, building a renewable energy grid is going to take time, and the large-scale transition will be costly. So executing on this sort of programming in favor of more sustainable solutions will need to be phased out. But a real financial investment and leverage on the government will eventually provide everyone access, not only to cheaper and more reliable power, but also to cleaner air, to new jobs, to opportunities for citizens to have ownership over local electricity infrastructure. Lebanon already has an informal electricity sector, as you might know. People who can't afford it, they buy and they use private generators when the state power goes off, which is, it's not very heard of in most countries. This business is already thriving. This is a business that's already part of the infrastructure and it's already thriving, and it could be turned green if we incentivize generator operators to switch to renewable energies as well. So given that people need urgent access to heat, urgent access to power, yes, some of the old solutions cannot be avoided in the short term, but we have local civil society, aid agencies, municipalities. They can all supplement community energy needs by immediately using solar-powered microgrids that are separate from the government's electricity network. So there are so many ways that people can start to do things differently. However, leading the way forward, besides the short term and really kind of working with existing solutions, leading the way forward, Lebanon needs help to transition to renewable energy. Otherwise, the same problems will keep repeating and millions of people will continue to suffer in the future. So it's a huge problem. The solutions are there. It needs more commitment and an understanding that it's long term. It's going to need some stamina in order to really transition at a large scale. But, you know, we cannot avoid it if we want to be more self-sufficient and start to really eliminate all the struggles and the pain that people are suffering from due to this huge problem. I think we have to start thinking in the long term and how to start making this transition and implementing more renewable energy solutions.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. You really described the problem and a solution to it in a way I've never heard before. And honestly, it's pretty inspiring, I would say, to have that, focus. And you pretty much, Rania, thank you so much for your time. You kind of inspired me right now, let me say, especially the point where we were talking about the future of education and how much, education is important and how much people are left in the dark about the future, whether it's AI or in general. And, I think if people do watch our podcast pretty much, they will learn something new and it's something useful and it's something that they can share with others and it can leave a positive impact. So I'm curious, the last question I want to ask you is, what do you think the future of education is going to be?
Well, I mean, we've been talking about technology and advances in technology a lot, and I think that the advances of technology and its effects are disruptive in nature to all industries, and the education sector is no different. Technology is completely changing the basic processes in which learning and teaching take place. It's revolutionizing existing infrastructures, systems, institutions, and even long-standing behavioral patterns and ingrained beliefs surrounding education. I think that technology is going to change education in profound ways. And some of those ways, number one, is really increasing accessibility. Technology already has and will continue to break geographical barriers that limited access to education in the past. Nowadays, you have most institutions of higher learning are offering some of their courses on online basis. There are also universities that are thriving by offering all their courses and programs online. So anyone can access a desirable formal education online from anywhere. Accessibility will continue to increase into the future. The second way I think education will change with technology is through increasing flexibility. I think that's incredibly valuable. With the rise of virtual learning and increased access to online education, you don't have to be limited to certain physical locations, nor you are forced to adhere to strict schedules and timelines to study like we're used to in the traditional ways. Technology is really making it easy for anyone to learn from anywhere at their own pace, depending on, of course, the learner's ability. As long as you schedule an amount of time and you're willing to devote time to learning and making the effort, you have access and you have the flexibility. The third change is another important factor, which is reducing costs for both education providers and learners. Using technology on both ends, the providers can use technological applications to provide the education, and that's decreasing their cost tremendously in terms of how they operate. Also, for learners, it's leading drastic reductions in the costs that they have to incur while accessing education. So, cost reductions due to the use of various technological applications will continue to benefit all stakeholders in the education sector. The fourth one, which I think is interesting too, is really changing how teachers and learners interact. In the past, teachers, they solely relied on actual meetings to deliver educational materials and interact with their students, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, and also moving into the future, the absolute dependence on physical meetings is gone. Technology is, it's, I mean, look at us now.
Yeah.
So technology is really providing both the teachers and the students a means in which they can interact and remain in touch all the time through applications and internet-based services, and this is absolutely great. The fifth one I think is also very interesting, is how we take tests when it comes to online tests and assessments. Now you have the ability to assess the performance of learners online without requiring them to necessarily attend assessment sessions physically like we're also used to. Right. So there's tremendous advantage in terms of flexibility, in terms of efficiency, in terms of impartiality of e-assessments for both sides as well. And students can accurately kind of get a feel of their own performance, while education institutions can accurately and efficiently assess their learners using online assessments, which means they also save time and money and other resources. Another one I think is very, very important is being able to accommodate the interests of learners who have special needs. And I think that's been like absolutely underrepresented in terms of providing education to people with special needs. It's been very lacking in the history of education. It's one of the most critical issues because we have very standardized and rigid procedures that learners and teachers go through in traditional classrooms. So that's why you see a lot of people, a lot of children who have special needs, they kind of become outcast because the system cannot really cater to their needs, and that inevitably works against their interests. So with technology, you can actually provide more flexibility to give access to interactive educational environments that suit the personal needs and capabilities, and even the challenges that learners with various disabilities face. Wow. Another one is lifelong learning. So we talked about that very early in the conversation, is that you have to seek out the knowledge, and part of technology can really enable that, especially in a technology-driven and technology-powered world. We have to learn new skills and we have to adapt to the changes that are happening constantly. With the rise of different technology-based educational platforms and all these new applications and online courses available to all of us, learning is becoming a truly lifelong activity and part of everyone's life, since you can learn about anything at any time. So moving into the future, digital learning will definitely become essential, and upskilling the workforce as well, and helping people to integrate much faster as things change in industries. And there's so much more.
Everything's changing, it sounds like. Right?
Everything is changing. Everything is changing. And you know, like, I think one of the most understated impacts is really making learning fun again.
Right.
Like, since when learning was fun before technology? Right. One of the main ways in which technology is and will be changing education relates to the various forms in which learning content is now delivered. As a result of technology, there are many forms of content that teachers can use to enhance the process of learning and teaching, from the use of videos, animations, games. We have now VR and AR, and we're going into the metaverse. Nice. So as a result, you know, the learning and teaching is now much more fun and more meaningful than the way it was in the past, and it will continue to become even much more fun with the metaverse bringing in a more full immersion into a digital classroom environment where students can start to interact with the learning content in very different ways. We're heading in a really interesting direction, and it's a matter of adapting to the change, learning the tools and the skills, and taking advantage of all these amazing opportunities in which technology is making education better for all of us and more accessible and flexible and engaging for all of us.
Very exciting, I'll say. It's very exciting, the way education is going. And I'm so this podcast itself was so educational, and I felt like so in the dark, but I feel like, talking to you now, I feel like 10 years in the future, honestly. So everyone listening to this, I hope you learned something and took something out of it. I definitely did, and share with others, especially younger people that can benefit from, this kind of specific knowledge. And all of us, right? We're all lifelong learners now, as you say. Rania, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. What an honor.
Thank you.
How cool is it, honestly?
Yes, really, thank you. Your insight has been, it's providing us with so much knowledge right now. And this is something that should be in the education system, this kind of information. People should learn about this.
All right, Rania, you got to go do some important work. I got to go edit this podcast. Saeed's got to go watch the Batman. Right?
Yes, the new Batman movie. You got to watch it.
All right, signing out. All right, see you later. Thank you so much.
See you later. It was such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Ali and Saeed. It was such a pleasure to be with you on the show. See you later.
Adios.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.